What is heavier than a mountain, yet invisible to the eye? What can build a golden castle, but rot the foundation from underneath? When the world sees perfection, but the mirror reflects a stranger, how long can the mask stay on before it cracks? In a sprawling mansion on the highest hill of the city, surrounded by hibiscus flowers and electric fences, a wealthy family prepared for the wedding of the decade. There were no arguments. There was no dust. There was only silence, and a secret buried so deep, they thought it had turned to dust. But secrets are like seeds, they do not die when you bury them, they grow. One woman had everything money could buy: respect, beauty, and a future husband who was a prince among men. She did everything she was told to do. So why did her hands shake when the music stopped? This isn't just a story about a ruined wedding or a public scandal. It's a story about the terrifying difference between the life we display to the neighborhood and the truth we live in the dark. Before the scandal that shook the city, there was Sarah. A daughter. A bride. A keeper of secrets. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we unlock this door, where in the world are you watching from? Is it a sunny afternoon in Accra, a rainy evening in London, or a quiet morning in Dallas? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss a truth being told. Now, take a deep breath and lean in. Because this isn't just about what they hid, it's about what happened when the hiding stopped. The morning sun did not gently touch the Benson estate, it conquered it, illuminating the white marble pillars and the manicured lawns until they gleamed like polished teeth. In this part of the city, silence was expensive. The only sounds allowed were the gentle hum of luxury cars and the rhythmic sweeping of the groundskeepers. Inside the master suite, Sarah sat before a vanity mirror framed in gold, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. Her skin was flawless, treated with the finest creams imported from overseas. Her hair was braided into an intricate crown, woven with pearls that cost more than a teacher's yearly salary. Tomorrow was the engagement party, the union of the Benson family and the wealthy Johnson dynasty. It was the event the newspapers had been whispering about for months. Yet, in Sarah's eyes, there was a dullness, a hollow grey fog that no makeup could cover. She touched the cool glass of the mirror, wishing she could reach through and pull out the girl she used to be, the girl who laughed without covering her mouth, the girl who didn't measure her worth by the heaviness of her jewelry. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Mrs. Benson swept into the room like a sudden storm. She was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper words, dressed in a stiff, expensive lace wrapper that rustled with authority. She did not ask Sarah how she was feeling. In the Benson household, feelings were considered messy, unnecessary things, like mud on a shoe. Instead, Mrs. Benson walked straight to the dress hanging on the mannequin, inspecting it for invisible flaws. "Stand up, Sarah," she commanded, her voice smooth but cold. "The photographer will be here in an hour. You look tired. Fix your face. People are watching. The governor's wife will be watching. We cannot afford a single mistake." Sarah stood, her legs feeling heavy, as if she were wading through water. "Mother," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you ever think about him? Do you ever wonder if he is hungry?" The air in the room instantly froze. Mrs. Benson spun around, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. The warmth of the morning seemed to vanish, replaced by a chill that settled deep in Sarah's bones. "We do not speak of mistakes," Mrs. Benson hissed, closing the distance between them until Sarah could smell the expensive rose perfume that always marks the scent of her mother's ruthlessness. "We fixed that problem 7 years ago. We paid the money. We sent him to the village. We cleaned your name so you could stand here today." The older woman grabbed Sarah's shoulders, her grip tight and bruising. "Look at this room. Look at your future. You are marrying a good man. You will be the envy of every woman in this country. Do not throw it away for a sentimental memory." That part of your life is dead. You are Sarah Benson, the pristine daughter. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, tears pricking the corners of her eyes, but she did not let them fall. To cry was to be weak, and the Bensons were never weak. They were perfect. But as her mother turned back to the dress, Sarah felt a phantom pain in her chest, a physical ache for a child she was forbidden to name, a boy who would be 7 years old today. Downstairs, the house began to fill with the chaos of perfection. Florists arrived with truckloads of white lilies, their scent overpowering the air. Caterers in crisp white uniforms polished silver platters until they shone like mirrors. The grand hall was being transformed into a palace, draped in silk and crystals. Sarah walked down the grand staircase, practicing the smile her mother had taught her, lips curved up, teeth showing, but eyes guarded. She watched the workers moving back and forth, building a stage for the performance of their lives. Every flower, every ribbon, every golden chair was a brick in the wall of their lie. They were building a fortress to keep the world out, but Sarah felt like she was the one trapped inside. She walked to the window and looked out at the massive iron gates that separated the estate from the rest of the world. They were designed to keep thieves out, but today, they felt like prison bars designed to keep the truth in. Suddenly, the phone in the hallway rang. It wasn't the soft chime of the house line, but the harsh, jarring ring of the old landline kept in the servants' corridor, a number only given to family in the village. Sarah froze. The maids were busy in the kitchen, no one else was near. Driven by a pull she couldn't explain, Sarah moved toward the phone. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She picked up the receiver, her hand shaking. "Hello," she whispered. The voice on the other end was rough, panicked, and breathless. It was her aunt, the woman paid to keep the secret. "Sarah. Is that you?" the aunt gasped. "I couldn't stop him. He found the letter. He knows who you are. He ran away this morning, Sarah. He took the bus to the city. He is coming for you." The receiver slipped from Sarah's sweat-slicked hand and dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth like a pendulum counting down the seconds before the explosion. The world did not stop spinning, though Sarah felt it should have. The preparations for the engagement continued with a cruel, rhythmic efficiency. The caterers laughed as they stacked pyramids of glasses, the florist argued over the placement of roses. Sarah stood in the hallway, the blood drained from her face, the sound of her aunt's voice echoing in her mind like a thunderclap. "He is coming." Her son. The boy she had only held for 3 hours before he was taken away. He was 7 years old, alone in a city that swallowed people whole. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her chest. She needed to run, to find him, to intercept him before he reached the gates. But as she turned toward the door, she saw her mother standing at the top of the stairs. Mrs. Benson didn't need to hear the phone call to know that the atmosphere had shifted. She saw the terror in her daughter's eyes, and like a predator sensing a wounded animal, she descended the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. "Who was on the phone?" Mrs. Benson asked, her voice low but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry. It was nobody, she lied, but she had never been a good liar. That was her mother's talent. Mrs. Benson snatched the hanging receiver, listened to the dial tone, and slammed it back into the cradle. She looked at Sarah, studying her trembling hands. It was the village, wasn't it? Mrs. Benson guessed, her face hardening into stone. "He is coming. Is that it?" Sarah nodded, a sob escaping her lips. "He's just a child, Mother. He's alone in the city." Mrs. Benson didn't blink. She pulled a walkie-talkie from her pocket. She kept close contact with the security team. "Security," she backed into the device. "Lock down the main gate. No uninvited guests. Anyone who looks like a beggar or a stray is to be turned away immediately. Use force if necessary." Sarah gasped, grabbing her mother's arm. "You can't. He's your grandson." Mrs. Benson pulled her arm away with a sneer. "He is a threat to this family's reputation. And today, we protect the name above all else." The hours dragged on, each minute a torture. Guests began to arrive, cars worth millions rolling through the gates that were now guarded by men with stern faces and batons. Sarah was stuffed into her engagement dress, a magnificent creation of silver lace that felt like a suit of armor. She stood beside her fiancé, Daniel, a kind man with a gentle smile who knew nothing of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "You look beautiful, Sarah," Daniel said, squeezing her hand. "But your hands are freezing. Are you cold?" Sarah looked at him, seeing the love in his eyes, and felt a wave of nausea. She was building a marriage on a foundation of lies. If he knew the truth, would he still look at her that way? Or would he look at her with the same disgust her mother showed? "I'm just nervous," she lied again. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Every time the gate opened, Sarah flinched, her eyes darting to the entrance, waiting for a small, dusty figure to appear. Then, it happened. The sun had begun to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the lawn. The garden was full of the city's elite, politicians, business tycoons, and pastors. A commotion erupted near the main iron gates. Voices were raised. The smooth jazz music playing in the background couldn't drown out the high-pitched, desperate cry of a child. "I want my mother. Let me in." The guests fell silent, turning their heads toward the noise. Mrs. Benson signaled furiously to the guards to handle it, her smile fixed and terrifyingly bright. "Just a local disturbance," she announced loudly to the guests. "Please, enjoy the champagne." But Sarah moved. She broke formation. She stepped away from Daniel and walked toward the noise. Through the bars of the gate, she saw him. A small boy, dusty, his clothes torn, his shoes worn through to the soles. He was fighting against a guard twice his size. "Mother," the boy screamed, looking through the bars, scanning the crowd of wealthy strangers. His eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto Sarah. He stopped struggling. The resemblance was undeniable. He had her eyes, her nose, the same shape of her face. The silence in the garden was absolute. The guests looked from the ragged boy to the pristine bride. Mrs. Benson rushed to Sarah's side, gripping her elbow so hard her nails dug into the skin. "Don't you dare," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "Turn around. Walk away. Tell them he is a confused street child. If you acknowledge him, you lose everything. You lose the money, the house, the husband. You will be nothing." Sarah looked at the boy, who was now crying softly, reaching a dirty hand through the bars. Then she looked at Daniel, who was staring at her with confusion and dawning realization. She looked at the terrified faces of the society women. The lie was safe, sitting right there on a silver platter. All she had to do was turn her back. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing until Sarah could hear the beating of her own heart in her ears. The choice stood before her like a canyon. On one side was the golden life, the mansions, the trips to Dubai, the respect of society, the comfort of ignorance. On the other side was the truth, messy, shameful, poor, and difficult. Mrs. Benson's grip tightened on her arm, a silent command to choose the gold. Sarah looked at her mother's face, a face that had never known a wrinkle of worry because she paid others to worry for her. Then she looked at the boy. He wasn't just a mistake. He wasn't a secret. He was flesh and blood. He was the only thing in this entire estate that was real. Sarah took a breath, and for the first time in her life, the air felt clear. She violently yanked her arm away from her mother. The force of it made Mrs. Benson stumble back in shock. "Open the gate." Sarah's voice rang out, not like the whisper of a frightened girl, but with the power of a lioness. The guards hesitated, looking at Mrs. Benson, but Sarah screamed again, her voice cracking with emotion. I said, open the gate. The head of security, sensing the shift in power, pressed the button. The heavy iron gates groaned and swung open. Sarah didn't wait. She ran. She ran in her expensive silver heels, stumbling on the grass. She ran past the shocked governor's wife. She ran past Daniel. She reached the boy and fell to her knees in the dust, ruining the dress that cost thousands. She pulled the dirty, crying child into her arms, burying her face in his dusty hair. I'm here, she sobbed, rocking him back and forth. I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Is that her child? How could she? The shame. Daniel walked forward slowly. He stopped a few feet away, looking down at Sarah and the boy. The betrayal was written plainly on his face. It wasn't the child that hurt him, it was the years of deception. You lied, he said simply, his voice devoid of anger but heavy with disappointment. You let me believe you were someone else. He took off the engagement ring he was wearing, placed it gently on a nearby table, and turned away. He walked to his car without looking back. Mrs. Benson let out a wail of despair, falling into a chair and crying out about how her life was ruined, how they were finished in this town. The guests, sensing the party was over and eager to spread the gossip, began to retreat to their cars. Within minutes, the driveway was full of taillights. The music had stopped. The food was untouched. The reputation of the Benson family had shattered like a glass dropped on concrete. But in the center of the driveway, surrounded by the ruins of her social status, Sarah felt a strange sensation. It was lightness. The heavy chain she had dragged for 7 years was gone. She stood up, holding the boy's hand. He looked up at her, wiping his nose. Are you mad at me? He asked, his voice small. Sarah looked down at him, really seeing him for the first time. She wiped a smudge of dirt from his cheek. No, she said, and a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes, broke across her face. I am not mad. I am free. She turned to the empty, grand house where her mother still wept over lost prestige. Sarah knew she couldn't stay there. That house was a museum of fake perfection, and she was done being a statue. 5 years later, the Benson mansion had been sold to pay off debts, and the name was rarely mentioned in high society. But in a small, modest house on the other side of town, there was laughter. Sarah sat on a worn rug, helping a 12-year-old boy with his homework. She didn't have gold jewelry anymore, her hands were rougher from work, and her clothes were simple cotton. She wasn't a queen of society. She was a teacher at a local school. The world had moved on, finding new scandals to devour. But as Sarah looked at her son, Isaac, laughing at a joke, she realized something profound. She had lost her reputation, yes. She had lost the wealth. But she had gained her soul. She had traded a perfect life for an imperfect, beautiful truth. And in the quiet of the evening, with no gates to lock the world out, she finally knew what it meant to be rich. Sarah never regained her place on the high seat of society. She never wore imported lace again, and the magazines forgot her name. But every night, she slept with a peace that no amount of money could purchase, knowing her son was safe in the next room, not hidden in the dark. This isn't just a story about a secret revealed. It is a lesson that a reputation is a heavy shield to carry, it will crush you if you don't put it down. The truth may cost you your comfort, but a lie will cost you your life. And a heart that chooses love over luxury, character over cash, and purpose over prestige, will never lead you wrong. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, what would you choose, a perfect reputation built on a lie, or a difficult life built on truth? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins and purpose finds its home.